Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just going to wait a few seconds and let everyone in. If you don't mind muting yourself as you come in, that would be great. Good evening. We're still letting some people in. While we're letting people in, write in the chat where you're joining us from. Let us know what brought you to this chat. We love to see where everyone's coming from. Thank you.
I'm getting
so
my earphones
much.
pierced.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. If you could just mute yourselves if you're not muted yet. We're still letting folks into the training. Let us know where you're from, why you're here, where you heard of this chat, and maybe what you're coming anticipating, what you're looking to get from this, or maybe what you're looking to share.
Okay. Amelia, I think what I'm going to do is ask you if you can mute everybody as the host. Perfect. That was perfect. And then me and Carol and Dana will unmute ourselves. So thank you for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Sam Fletcher, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York State chapter of NASW. We are so excited for this chapter chat, and we owe a huge debt of gratitude for Carol and Dana for agreeing to do this with us. And I know that we're all going to learn and be in a great space tonight. And now I'm going to hand it over to Amelia, and she's going to let you know how we're going to interact tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. This is one of our chapter chats. This is developed, when COVID started, we were looking for an opportunity to socially connect while physically distancing. And now it's just become an opportunity for social workers to gather together on any topic, share resources, find peer support, find a place for community care. And I just thank everyone for joining us this evening. I want to be clear that this program does not hold CEUs. I'll put in a link to our upcoming CE programs. We have a lot of different options, a lot of free CEs for our members, but this chapter chat does not hold CEs. So just want to make sure everyone is aware that there's no CEs for this program. I'm just going to go over really simple how to use Zoom. I'm sure everyone here knows, but it's always good to use a little refresher. So first of all, I want to point out that we have closed captioning on. If you want to hide that closed captioning, you can hit the caret next to the little CC box. You can choose to hide it. You can choose to view the full transcript, and it'll pop right up on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can also drag and drop that closed captioning anywhere on the screen so it doesn't cover up anyone's face or any of the content of the presentation slides. Next, I'm going to ask that folks, when the presentation is going, please engage with us in the chat box. Any questions, any comments, any feedback or insight, throw that in the chat box during the presentation. Keep yourself muted when you aren't speaking. You can also feel free to use those reaction buttons if there's anything that you want to react to. There will be a time when we're going to look to be having conversation. We want to hear from folks and foster a sense of community together. Some of our questions will be for Jewish social workers to speak to from a place of a lived experience. We ask that when these questions are posed for Jewish social workers, that all other social workers and allies of Jewish social workers be mindful that we're amplifying and centering those lived experiences of Jewish social workers tonight. Our presenters will let you know which questions are open to all attendees and which questions we're looking to hear from Jewish social workers who have those lived experiences. So that is all the time that I'm going to take up. I will say that this is being recorded and it will be available to you after this program for you to share it with anyone who you think would benefit from its content. But without taking up our time, I'm going to hand it over to our two presenters tonight, Carol Cox and Dana Marlowe.
Hi, but first, just let me say that Dana and I are so totally overwhelmed by the incredible response to this chat. It's like 225 people or so signed up. Now, whether you all come is another question, but just to think that nationwide we had that many people is just, I mean, we really don't know what to say. I didn't know what to wear. I mean, I fussing with this whole thing. But anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so many people that, you know, it's going to be hard to get through everything and to hear from everyone. And that's why we are so thrilled that Sam and Amelia are staying with us to help do the logistics of how you reach people and how people talk and all that. But let me just start by saying, last January, an article that I had written on addressing anti-Semitism in social work education was published, right? And when I was working on this article, I was stunned to find that nothing had really been written about anti-Semitism and social work since 1991. I couldn't believe it, right? But especially with all that we're going through now. And so, you know, the article was published and fine. Well, unlike other stuff that I've written, I immediately started hearing from people from across the country, like, this article is so important, and, you know, this is happening, and this has been my experience in Long Island, and yada da 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 da. And there was such this immediate kind of a response that I thought, well, we've got to do something, right? And so I contacted NASW, and I think within a day, Amelia and Sam got back to me and said, yes, we need to do something. And hence we started working on this chat. And I mean, their response has just been tremendous. Thank you, ladies, so much. Dana and I are so thrilled with this. So I'm not going to talk a long time to talk. Dana is going to show some PowerPoints that we think are really critical and give the foundation for where we are today. It is a chat. So what we are really going to be asking and looking for are your responses, your experiences. What should social work be doing? What should social work education be doing? What's our role in the community in terms of combating anti-Semitism? I mean, I don't have to go through the fact that, you know, oppression is a focus of social work. Social justice is one of our missions, and anti-Semitism is totally the antithesis to both of those. And that as a profession, we need to be paying attention. Just a couple things I'm going to say before Dana does these incredible, introduces herself and presents the PowerPoints. We were just looking at this a while ago, and how much of a priority this has become. In May 21st of this year, the House of Representatives passed a resolution 428 condemning anti-Semitism and reaffirming its commitment to combating hate, bigotry, and violence against Jewish people and the Jewish community. In June, the Senate signed this as well. So it became legislation. There were a few changes, but it became a bipartisan resolution. They've also asked Congress to send a letter to Biden urging action to protect the Jewish community. Fascinating that we realized also July 28th, not a month ago, right? Or just about a month ago, there was a swastika carved into the elevator in the State Department in DC. And it was just opposite we have a special envoy in the State Department, a special envoy's office that looks at anti-Semitism in this country and around the globe. This was put in the elevator right next to his office, okay? And Biden responded to this by another speech saying anti-Semitism is not a relic. It's not a relic of the past. And there is an urgent need to stand up and reject it, as there is with other forms of hate. So, you know, it is there. We who are here today know that it's there, that this is a pressing issue, and that something needs to be done. And certainly social work needs to be, we feel, active. With that, I'm going to go on to Dana.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Dana Marlowe, and I'm from Fordham University. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And I'm only going to speak for a few minutes before we kind of get into the chat. But I do want to say that I guess maybe a year ago or half a year ago, Carol sent me her article, and I felt so inspired by it. And I was thinking, well, what other literature has been written? And I was shocked to see that so little had been published. Right. Last article was in 1991 about social work and anti-Semitism. And I mean, even in our own school, like we don't have a lot on anti-Semitism anymore, and yet the incidents are increasing. So what Carol and I thought was the best thing to do, and we can send you this PowerPoint after the presentation through NASW, is just to show you some statistics, and then we're going to kind of open it up for discussion. But even though we hear about all the incidents, I still thought it was very important for you to see them. So I'm just going to share screen for a minute, well, a few minutes. Let me just get it up. Okay. So, you know, a lot of people, when we talk about anti-Semitism, we've been questioned quite a bit, like what definition do you use? Because there are actually many definitions of anti-Semitism. I'm not going to read this through, but Carol and I thought this was the best, one of the best definitions we could find. And we thought it would be helpful to share it with all of you. So if you can just take a minute to read it. And again, I think it's a good definition to reference. If you're teaching about anti-Semitism, again, it's just very helpful. And here it goes on further to explain it. Okay, and again, I'm not going to read the slide to you, but again, you will get the slides from us, so you have this definition. So again, I just wanted to show a few slides of what's happening in terms of statistics. And I found this one very interesting. It's the FBI 2019 hate crime report. And it shows incidents, offenses, victims, and known offenders. And what we have is it's highlighted the incidents that were anti-Jewish. And please just take a look at the numbers and how much higher they are than the other numbers on the chart. And it kind of shows what's happening, right? Or this is what was happening in 2019. And we're going to show you more current numbers also. But again, we wanted to give you almost a variety of how different organizations were also looking at anti-Semitism. And this is from Jewish Federation. And it says the Jewish, sorry, I'm just moving your pictures. The Jewish community faces the highest increase in religiously motivated hate crimes. And I just think it's 60% of religiously motivated crimes are directed at the Jewish community, 14% increase in religiously motivated crimes against Jews from the year before, and a 56% increase in assaults against Jews in the last 2 years. I mean, that is a tremendous increase. And here we have the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the United States from 2008 to 2020. And even though we see a few dips, basically from about 2013 on, we're seeing an increase. There's a bit of a decrease between 2017 and 2018, a slight decrease from 2019 to 2020, but overall, we are seeing growing numbers of incidents. And bear with me one more second. I'm going to show you one more thing because the ADL does a lot of tracking of this. And sorry, bear with me 1 minute. My PowerPoint is not leaving the screen. There it goes. I'm going to bring this up. Okay, can everyone see that? I'm not sure. Carol, can you see it?
Not seeing the screen. I think you need to share screen again.
Okay, yeah, it's because people are coming in. And so when I hit share screen, that's what I got. Here we go. This should be good. Can everyone see that? So you can go into the ADL tracker, and what it shows you is on a daily basis, what's happening around their country. So for example, August 22nd in San Bernardino, California, a traffic sign was vandalized with spray painted swastika graffiti. In Florida, the same day, a woman at a water park allegedly called another woman a dirty Jew. August 18th, a large swastika was found spray painted on a trash can in a Santa Monica park. In Ossining on the 16th, a swastika and other graffiti was found painted on a slide at a local playground in Ossining. And it goes on and on. And I think if you think about, look at any of the statistics, these are the ones you should really look at, because the numbers are shocking. The incidents are shocking. And yet, as social workers, are we addressing all of this? And I can say on a personal level, I live about 5 minutes away from the murder that happened in 2019 of a Jewish man, where someone walked into a house that was a temple. The person walked in with an axe, injured 5 people and killed 1 person. And it's 5 minutes from my house. So, you know, I really feel the impact. And I feel as social workers, we need to do something. And Carol, and does anyone have any questions on those statistics? And Carol, do you want to kind of start our discussion now? You're muted. There you go.
Okay, so Dana and I had some discussion questions that we thought could get it rolling. And we really want you to think about it, to speak, whatever, okay? So I think our first question, if I remember, Dana, was what has been your experience with anti-Semitism? Okay. Then we have a question: how should schools of social work integrate and teach about, should they? Well, I guess the first question is, should they? But I suspect most of us here would say, yes, they should teach and talk about and so forth about anti-Semitism. And then another question, which is a big one, is what should really the whole profession be doing? And that's not just at the micro level, that's at the macro level in terms of anti-Semitism. So I think that's, those were sort of our main questions. And we want to leave it up to discussion, because this is just a discussion. Let's hear from people.
Hi, it's Annette Poisner from Toronto. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Annette. Nice to
Yes.
meet you.
Hi, how are you doing? Lovely to see you, and thank you so much for all your efforts. Maybe I could ask, or I'll put one more question on our agenda here.
Sure.
So I want to tell you about a recent event in Toronto. The Jewish Family and Child Service issued a statement about anti-Semitism. All these, of course, it's happening everywhere. It's happening in Toronto. The Children's Aid Society issued a sort of a stand against anti-Semitism. The Children's Aid Society then received massive resistance about the statement that they had made about anti-Semitism. What they did next is retract it and apologize for it, at which point the Jewish Family Child Service issued a shocked and hurt response, and obviously made phone calls, at which point the Children's Aid Society retracted their retraction and once again took a stand against anti-Semitism. And what's happening here, now this is that one thing, and I need to tell you one more story. Imagine a student who is in one of these equity diversity courses, and there is the opportunity to do a presentation, a PowerPoint and presentation about something she's very passionate about and relating to this cause. So she does a presentation on anti-Semitism. And she shows me the PowerPoint. And if I showed you the PowerPoint, I mean, I don't think you would have any issues with what was in there. She gets, the teacher asks to book a meeting with her, and she is rebuked for a full hour that she has white privilege and that she should not have been discussing this, that, and the other, and completely critiquing what was in this presentation. So I do think, relative to what happened with the Children's Aid, and I know what's happening here is there is this presumption that Jews have white privilege, and this is in the social work schools. So as faculty, I wonder if you're familiar with this and if you have advice. As I've gotten involved in this, I'm practically speechless, and I have no clue how do we address this? That we are being told that we're very rich And we are not in, you know, whether Jews are getting beat up or whatever, that's irrelevant. That, in other words, there are certain biases that are sort of infecting. Anyway, maybe you get the gist.
I think that's a great, it's a wonderful example. I'm going to cut you off because I think it's opening up a lot of discussion here. Who was it who just said somebody in Georgia? I saw somebody say something.
Yeah, Barbara Griffin.
Okay.
And so I'll say, because I think, first of all, what you said is so important. And Barbara kind of said, it's so ingrained in South Georgia that sometimes I forget to pay attention. I had a doctor at a clinic I work in reference Jews all being rich. This was a Black woman from the West Indies, and she wasn't joking. Also, a coworker asked me if it bothered me that I'm going to hell. I mean, that is absolutely awful. And I will say, and before we hear more comments, I have heard from Jewish students that they feel uncomfortable talking about anti-Semitism because they feel like they are viewed as having white privilege. And in a way, they're not then bringing up their own injustices that they've suffered from. And some of you have put that in the chat also. And I guess, Stephen, did you want to comment first? I know there are a lot of hands that came up.
Yeah, I have another comment that's related. I just want to bring up a point about children of Holocaust survivors. I'm a child of a Holocaust survivor, and there's an added dimension to anti-Semitism when you're a child of a Holocaust survivor. I was born 8 years after the Holocaust. My grandparents all 4 grandparents were killed during the Holocaust. 30 members of my family were also killed. And when there's anti-Semitism, then it affects me and I guess Holocaust survivors and the children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors in a very direct way, because it has been a direct experience in my family. So I just want to put that out here.
Thank you. Very good point. Yes. All right. We've got so many people saying things. There's someone.
I think I see Rebecca Joseph has her hand up.
Okay.
I think you need to unmute, Rebecca.
I'm going to send you an unmute request, Rebecca.
All right, Rebecca, why don't we go back to you and go to Abigail first? Because I
Right.
see.
Abigail, can you unmute?
Hi.
Good. Hi.
I'm actually about to be at Fordham next week and maybe one of your classes starting first semester. So I wanted to meet you guys. I'm assuming you know about they posted about Rena Goldberg on the communications, like someone in communications posted an article actually like yesterday or 2 days ago about her experience with anti-Semitism. Not necessarily at Fordham, but just seeing that, and then seeing that you were both leading a conference today. I texted. I got an. I shouldn't name probably. I don't care if it's a problem. It's a problem. I Zoomed with Hunter and told them that I couldn't come because I wouldn't feel safe on their campus because there have been assaults there, and then they just passed this anti-Semitic resolution, and you've seen a lot of professors resigning from their I forgot what it's called, their professional group, and nothing was done to address it, and I declined, told them why, and I chose Fordham hoping so badly that I'd made the right choice. And yesterday I texted my parents, I know I chose the right place because
you already have an A. What can I say?
So I just wanted to thank you so much. Like I could cry with like gratefulness. So thank you. And I do have like a question and a concern. She did tell me to stay away from one professor who I will not name, but we all know it's an issue everywhere, right? So of course it's going to be at Fordham too. It's widespread, and there's unfortunately no place that has been untouched by it, anti-Semitism. But I'm a little bit worried about about, you know, being in these social justice classes and all these things that I believe in and all these causes being spoken about. But for some reason, I feel like I don't want to be the what about girl, you know, in every class raising my hand, like, you're forgetting this, you're forgetting that. Like, what about you? You know, I don't want to be that annoying person raising her hand in every course, but I'm almost worried that everyone will speak about every ism that there is, yet anti-Semitism is for some reason always left out. And I just feel so alone in that, you know?
Right. And that's one reason why, Abigail, we showed the slides in the beginning, because I think more and more people are feeling like you do, like it's always left out, and yet it's increasing like exponentially at the same time. So there's a definite problem. If while it's so increasing and it's really out there, why aren't we addressing it more? And that's kind of the whole purpose of this, right? To figure out
Yeah.
what we can do. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I'm really glad you're coming to Fordham.
Oh, yeah, we'll
you.
take care of you.
Thank you.
Don't worry.
And once we hear more about your experiences, we definitely then we're going to change the direction of the conversation and talk more about what can we do. But I think it's so important to hear your experiences.
Right. So those who haven't spoke, anybody want to share anything about your experience? Why this?
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm a MSW student at Case at the Mandel School in Cleveland. And towards the end of last year, there was like a lot of anti-Semitism, and it was on Zoom. So it was like very hard to disrupt, but you know, I kept speaking up about the Jewish perspective and Israel, and I was silenced by my classmates and told that it's not appropriate. And the professor, of course, just sat there and listened. She didn't say a word, which I find is very common in the MSW program, that professors are not like correcting misinformation. And then 2 other Jewish students and I appealed to the Dean of Diversity and Inclusion to put out a statement regarding anti-Semitism, because, you know, they put out a statement for everything. It took a month and multiple meetings and 100 emails back and forth for them to finally agree to do so. And we had to word it for them, and they wanted to put our names on it as the signatures, which we wouldn't agree to. And it was just like dehumanizing. They wanted to know if we could share our perspective and explain to people like why we need to be included. And they do a lot of anti-oppression and anti-racism work in the school, and always Jewish people are left out of it. Now that we've returned to campus, I've sort of been blacklisted by a lot of classmates. Like I come in, you know, like the whole cancel culture, like I feel it when I walk in the room. People won't look at me, they won't talk to me. And I've spoken to professors before classes started and told them that, like, I don't feel safe in a classroom where I can be attacked at any point and not allowed to defend myself. And some professors have been really good about it, but, you know, it's just the first week of classes. So I'm waiting to see how things go. But I know that my openly Jewish presence has made like a lot of people upset and uncomfortable. So yeah.
Yeah, but Rebecca, I commend you, because you're doing what you feel is right and you're facing an injustice. It's not only, you know, it's not only about you individually, it's about, you know, other Jewish students at your university. I'm just sorry that you've been treated badly as a result.
I don't. The question also becomes, what if it's happening to her? It's got to be happening to so many people.
Right.
That's
And
my thought.
it's silent, right?
Yeah, I keep speaking up because I know there's other Jewish students who are very quiet and not as obviously Jewish. I was told that I'm really problematic when I was discussing, like, I'm also Middle Eastern. My mom is Iranian. So I was discussing a racist experience I had, and I was told by white students that I'm really problematic. And so they don't.
And they're in social work.
Yes, yes. So they don't see it as like a possibility that, like, I'm not from Poland. I'm Jewish and Middle Eastern, and if I share my experience, they're deeming it as problematic. It's very bizarre. I have found some allies though in the school, and I feel very comfortable with those friendships.
It's just very difficult to be an advocate in a school on your own.
Right.
We're really not powerful in a sense. You're dependent upon their grades and the professors and all of that. And it's a difficult, horrible position.
Absolutely. But thank you for sharing it. And I know Rachel Goldberg wanted to talk, and I know we have some other hands too. But yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, so I'm from Michigan, and I originally am from Metro Detroit area where there's a pretty big Jewish population. There's also a very big Middle Eastern population. It's just a very diverse area. And that was my norm growing up. And then I came to Grand Rapids, Michigan for graduate school, and it's very opposite. It is very Dutch and white Catholic and just very opposite. And so I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism, just moving from the different communities and people thinking that I'm not Jewish, or I don't look Jewish enough, or I look Hispanic, or I look something else. So I experienced anti-Semitism with that. And then also experiencing anti-Semitism within my graduate program. Like that one person had mentioned, I was always that person that everyone kind of knew in my classes as being that one Jewish person and speaking up because I was the one person. And if I didn't, no one else would. And one specific event that happened that was very upsetting, especially towards the very end of my program last year, or 2 years ago when I graduated now, we were watching a documentary about some family, and the family had been involved in some sexual assault. And afterwards, the professor was asking, the students why they thought this had happened, looking at the family's history, background, things like that. And the professor and multiple students thought that because the family was Jewish, that this is why they were pedophiles. And the family in the movie had said that they were not even practicing Judaism. It's just, they said one thing about it, and it just turned into this whole thing. And of course, I spoke up and, shared my spiel and what I had to say and why that was an incorrect statement, and how no one would look at that if they were any other religion. And then my professor and multiple people after I spoke my piece were like, "Oh, you're so brave, how like brave of you, like so proud of you for speaking up," which I think then kind of put me back even further and made me feel even farther from them. Because as social work, it shouldn't be like a proud thing or a brave thing to stand up for what's right. That should just be, as social workers, what we do. And yeah, it just made me feel even, like I said, further from my classmates and further from my professor, for them then applauding me for standing up for myself and for other people almost. And there's been other incidences in my graduate program, but that was just the biggest one.
And I think, the main point is that we're social workers, so we should be fighting injustice, intolerance. And you're right, it shouldn't just be that we're commended for doing that, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing, no matter what our background.
It's the ethics of the profession.
Right.
It's quite stunning. I mean, to me, this is so illuminating. I think it particularly touches me to think that students are actually going through this at school. And here you are in going to professional school to become a social worker, to do all of the things that we're saying you should do, fight injustice, blah, blah, blah. And then you are being picked on, not only just picked on, alienated. I'm trying to put my head around that because this is so important, really so important. Jessica, I think I see a hand. Jessica Frankel. Good, thank you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I think it's interesting to me because I think when I was younger, I'm 31, when I was in my teens and 20s, I got enlightened and learned all about feminism. And as I was learning about it, I started just seeing the pervasiveness of like sexism and misogyny and everything. And it just made me so furious. Then it seems like I had another awakening in the last few years when it comes to anti-Semitism. And now I see it everywhere and it's driving me crazy. So like I grew up in New York and I look back on things that happened when I was a kid. Like I saw some people put in the chat being told you're going to hell. Like, oh yeah, of course that seemed like normal to me. But I mean, I didn't even really worry about that because kids are just mean, and I don't know. Um, but then when I went to Tulane, which is a lot of Jewish people at Tulane. I went there for college and for graduate school. But in between that, I lived in Georgia for a while and I worked in immigrant rights organization. And one of the things that I noticed was when I was working there, this was pre-Trump, there was comments about like, oh, we don't want to work with that Jewish group because they might be supporting Israel, or yeah, like saying we are not going to work with this group. And then a whole bunch of groups last year put out a thing condemning the ADL, saying they won't work with the ADL, which I was absolutely horrified by. And it was a bunch of organizations that I had like worked with. And I was like, can you imagine like that happening with any other major, like the leading civil rights organization for one ethnic group or one minority group to say, oh, we won't work with them. Like we won't ally with that group. And I was extremely upset and disturbed by that. And just all the, I mean, we've seen a lot of like overt anti-Semitism, like the violence and the, you know, that kind of stuff. But it shows up in these pervasive ways. Like in last year, I think I posted something online about how, you know, the Christmas season can be a little alienating for me as a Jewish person. And I had so many of my friends say, oh, well, it shouldn't, and just like dismissed what I felt and just couldn't hear like, yeah, maybe Christmas is a little alienating for a Jewish person. Like it's okay. People
Right.
couldn't hear. But then also just the whole conversation, like everything that happened with Israel this past year. I mean, it's been a very challenging thing to talk about because personally, I think as a social worker and just as a person who's invested in social justice, I was extremely disturbed hearing about violence and hearing about displacement, and I was very upset about it. But I was on top of that very upset about the way people were talking about the whole issue, because it's turned into this narrative about Jews who are in Israel are now colonizers, which is a really an offensive way of talking about Jews being in Israel, because I think Jews have an innate connection to Israel. Like that's where Jewish people are originally come from. So to say that we're colonizing Israel, we're actually decolonizing. I'm not saying that justifies any human rights violations against the Palestinians, because it doesn't, and I'm totally against that. And I'm just horrified by the whole situation all around, and I didn't know how to feel. I felt so caught in the middle because I was like, I absolutely am against the way Palestinians are being treated, but I also can't have people say to me that Jews are colonizing Israel. That's ridiculous, and it's just deeply offensive. And it felt like there was nowhere to go. There was like nowhere to have a safe place to talk about it. And just everyone kept talking about it in such a reductive way. And it was really scary. And I was feeling really, really like trapped. And like there was nowhere to talk. There was nowhere to express it. And just nobody felt safe talking about it. None of the Jewish people I knew felt safe talking about it, because there was also all these other issues going on. And it's almost like, oh, it's wrong if we talk about our issue because it's considered not as bad, or it's like, don't take away from, I think some other people kind of mentioned, don't take away from that because, you know, Jews have other kinds of privilege. And I mean, I do think that I have white privilege because I'm functioning as a white person in America, but that doesn't mean that we all have interlocking intersectional identities. And I feel like that sometimes gets like thrown out when it comes to anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
No, I was just going to say that what Jessica said is something we really need to remember, Dana. I'm trying to keep notes and listen.
I know.
But this idea of a safe place.
Right.
And so many of you have now said that graduate school is definitely not a safe place. Being in the community, working in an organization, if you have the wrong idea or you want to have some kind of a group, a collaborative group, you have to be careful who you're collaborating with, because that may not be a safe place. So there's things that I think you're coming out which are just so illuminating that we didn't really realize. So thank you. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Jessica.
Allison, you've got a hand up for a long time, please.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
So I'm so grateful that you're running this tonight and that everyone here is speaking about their experiences. I've been a social worker for almost 20 years now. And, you know, my experience in graduate school, fortunately, was not what's going on today. I went to Columbia University. I had Jewish professors. I had a lot of Jewish, you know, fellow students in my master's program, and I felt extraordinarily safe on that campus. I am very upset and disheartened to hear about all these incidences that have been going on, not just recently in the graduate courses, but over the past 10 years or so. I've been hearing about Columbia actually being one of the biggest offenders of issues, you know, having anti-Israel protests and accosting Jewish students, you know, just on the steps of their main library on the main campus, where I used to hang out and drink coffee with some of my friends before class. You know, I couldn't imagine having that experience as a student. And I went into this profession. I had grown up in a town that was mostly, you know, Catholic and, you know, very few Jewish, you know, students. And I grew up with, you know, being the weird one who couldn't attend a sleepover because it was Rosh Hashanah or, you know, something like that. I always kind of felt on the outside. I was called names growing up. I did have pennies thrown at me in middle school. So there were some incidences that I've definitely grown up with. I also grew up with, you know, a family, you know, my grandparents lived during World War II, and my grandfather fought for the US Army. He helped liberate a concentration camp. Never spoke about it, would never speak about his experience until much, much later on in his life, because it was that horrific, obviously. So I grew up with this, I guess, almost like a trauma, this generational trauma, you know, kind of being passed down. And when I'm in my field, in my practice, and I'm collaborating, or I'm on some of these anti-racist seminars, or even collaborating with people online asking for, you know, tips or, you know, strategies, things that we do with our clients, I hear the anti-Semitism and this part is always overlooked and just not discussed. And I feel sometimes that bringing it up, I don't want to be the one to say, well, what about the Holocaust? Or what about anti-Semitism? Or what about this? What about that? Because I am afraid I will be attacked and being told I'm racist, because yes, I am white. And yes, like the woman before said, yes, we are living like a white, you know, with white privilege in America. And that's absolutely true on a lot of levels. And I definitely understand that. And I agree with that. But at the same time, I also feel very, I can't speak out about being Jewish, because about things that I face, because I have been attacked for doing that by my colleagues. All I asked was one time on a group, a question about a student of mine who was facing an anti-Semitic act at, you know, where I work. And I was just asking for a tip on how to support the student. I did not bring up any kind of political anything with Israel, nothing. I just asked, hey, anybody have a tool or a strategy that they might use? I got majorly attacked by a couple of social workers telling me that I should do the right thing and teach about the oppression of Palestinians. And I said, whoa, 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 someone drew a swastika on the blacktop of our school and the kid is upset about it. I'm not talking about anything that has to do with Israel and the Palestinians or anything. And I got completely attacked, and I was told that I hope you do the right thing. And it just was very uncomfortable. So I'm just, you know, it's very scary to talk about these kinds of things with my colleagues. I don't feel like I can, you know, talk about a lot. So I very much appreciate this tonight, and, you know, for everyone, you know, talking, because it's very real. It's, you know, yes, we have a privilege, but at the same time, not all of us really do. You know, when you don't feel like you could wear your any kind of Jewish symbols or anything, that you might get accosted for it, that's a problem as well. So I thank you.
Right. No, and I appreciate that you brought up just your colleagues' reactions, because I'm going to make an assumption that those were social workers. Right. And that's very sad. So thank you. I know Martha Flumenbaum has had her hand up for a while, and so I think we should hear a comment from Martha, and then we definitely have to hear more about what we can do. Yeah, Martha.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also echo what has already been said. I really appreciate that this forum is available. I grew up in Manhattan. I've lived here all my life. I never experienced any kind of anti-Semitism until I went to social work school. And I haven't experienced any since I graduated. I went to Hunter. I was there from 2014 to 2016. We had a swastika in the ladies' room. On our student Facebook page, people were posting links to like neo-Nazi websites and posting that Jewish people suck people's blood and all kinds of crazy things. People would wear shirts to school that said like the F word and then Israel. One time I was in a class and someone was saying that white history is a history of genocide and colonization. And I said, well, my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. I don't think of my own family history as a history of perpetuating genocide and colonization. My grandparents were survivors of a genocide. And the person said to me, this was in a class of 150 people in front of professors and other students, oh, don't play the Jew card. It was like a very hostile environment to go to school. I never experienced anything like that before. My closest friend at school was an Orthodox Jew, and she dropped out after her first year and went to school for like nonprofit management in Israel. She couldn't take it at all. So I graduated 5 years ago, and I haven't experienced any anti-Semitism since I graduated, but the experience stayed with me, and I never join anything like this, and I never speak to a group of people I don't know. I never talk about this, but the experience stayed with me, and I felt compelled to come to this and to speak to a bunch of strangers, which isn't my way and isn't how I roll. But I'm really grateful to hear other people's experiences and that this forum exists for other people to share. So thank you.
Thank you. I think Carol King has had her hand up for a long time, correct?
Oh, hi, thank you.
Hi.
Not too long. So I'm probably one of the older people here. I graduated in 1990 from Columbia, and there was one slight incident where a professor made a reference to a Jap in class, and I pulled him aside privately after class and explained to him what that meant, and he was very apologetic, but that was long ago and far away. I wanted to, and I work mostly in Jewish organizations. I must be your neighbor, Dana, because I work for Rockland Jewish Family Service.
Oh, I'm in Rockland, yes.
Right down the road. But I
Yep.
wanted to mention something that happened within NASW itself. During the second Women's March, if any of us remember that, there was a lot of controversy because of Linda Sarsour and a number of other women who had ties to the Nation of Islam and had said some rather difficult statements. And I have always felt so alone, by the way, as a social worker dealing with things like this. But NASW made some type of statement, I have it in a file somewhere, I didn't know, that talked about how we realize that some of these statements are controversial or anti-Semitic or something like that, but we feel that the march is so important that we must go on supporting it. And for me, I felt like, well, I'm expendable for something else. Right. And that came from my professional organization. That came from NASW. So it feels very lonely, as I hear from other people. And I was so thrilled that you called this meeting together, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot out there. There's really no place for us to hear each other and validate each other. So I thank you. But I just wanted to say, it's not just at universities, and it's also, I felt like there it was at NASW, and maybe, anyway. So.
Well, let's hope it's changed. I think with Sam and Amelia, it's definitely making, there's real efforts now. I think
You're here. Yeah.
You're here.
Right. We're doing this tonight. So I feel like this is the beginning of something. Like, so many people came and they have so much to share. And I feel like it's awful to hear the stories, but it does mean that we have to make some changes.
And it does mean that this anti-Semitism is very much alive in social work, both in the community and in the schoolroom, classroom.
Right. And I think, Bonnie, you wanted to say something, right? Bonnie Pollock?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for convening this discussion. It's so important. I just wanted to say a few things. Thank you, Dr. Morlow and Dr. Cox. I did my dissertation on the impact of the transmission of the trauma of the Holocaust on children of survivors. And they had all the children of survivors I interviewed told me that with the increase of anti-Semitism, they are so worried. They see the same thing possibly happening here in the US, that they've all made preparations to quickly escape when that knock comes on the door. And it was really quite prevalent. I myself have never experienced it, but I know that when my sons who wear kippas on their head were teenagers and were going to a Jewish youth group on Saturday afternoon, they were taunted, they were chased, and I would advise them to run into the nearest building and ask the doorman if they could just stay there for a while. So it does exist, but as a social work teacher, professor, I've made it my business to give the students an opportunity to talk about whatever kind of oppression or trauma they've experienced. So I've had Orthodox Jewish women talk about it, whereas the non-Jewish students will say, well, they're not aware of this woman in France being tortured and killed because she was Jewish. And they would start to exchange resources so that they would be able to have the necessary information. And when I teach or I'm asked to lecture to a diverse group, I always make sure to be aware that I don't want to just focus on the Jewish trauma, but being aware that there's trauma in every community, but that there should be understanding that we all experience trauma in a different way. So I think it really behooves social work education to focus on persecution in all communities and to try to educate students about what kind of persecution is there, not just in one group or another group, but across the board, and then exchange those stories so that they hear all of it.
Thank you. Good.
Excellent point.
Thank you.
And so, oh, I see Abigail has her hand up again. Yeah, Abigail.
Sorry, one more
No, don't be
thing.
sorry at all.
Just to like not shift, we don't have to shift yet, but just, you know, to the other question of what can we do, what should we do in education? First of all, my first answer is this, like, please keep doing things like this. And also in terms of the actual school, because I was just at orientation, I'm sure this applies for other schools as well, though, that, you know, I forgot what the name of the justice committee is called, the social justice committee. I'm really sorry. But, or even student congress, maybe like we can form a subcommittee, and by we, I don't mean just Jewish people, I mean any allies. Something in Congress or in that other, in the racial, I'm so sorry, I forgot the name, equity group. It would be so nice to have that kind of platform, and consistently too, you know, like a place to meet up, a place to share experiences, a place to know that there are allies, you know, some subcommittee, something would
Right.
be an incredible thing for me.
No, it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Right. In a place where you feel safe to kind of express this also.
Yeah,
There is
thank
really
you.
the need for safety.
Yes.
And I think that neither Dana nor I were really aware of how much of an issue that is for students and for even people working in the community and agencies, that when you speak up about being Jewish and that you're immediately feeling that you're going to be a victim, you're going to be attacked. And that's going to keep so many people, as we know, from saying anything, because there's so few of us who feel I can go right out there and say this. So you kind of just let it go, but you struggle and you suffer. So I think this whole idea of safety is so important.
If I could just respond for 1 minute, there is a group on Facebook. It's a Jewish Therapist Collective. I can't remember the exact name, mostly American, but for those who are, you know, there is a bunch of therapists and therapy students from all the different disciplines. And there's a subcommittee about anti-Semitism and trying to pull together visions of what the activism could be, writing journal articles, you know, so please check it out if you're interested.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. That is a great resource. And you said it's on Facebook?
Yes.
All right, that's great. And I know Amelia introduced me to the Jewish on Campus on Instagram, and it just shows a lot about what's going on different campuses. And I mean, I think once you know it's happening, there's even more of an ability to fight it, right? And so I feel like if we're closed off by it, you know, or you just hear it here and there, but once you really know people, I mean, just hearing all of you makes me feel even more inspired. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And oh, I see Jane Miller has her hand up.
First of all, thank you so much for doing this, and it's an honor to be here, and thanks everyone for sharing their stories. It's really a privilege to have everybody feel safe enough to do that, so thank you. I just wondered if NASW or if anybody has contacted the, social work schools get recertified every few years. And when I was doing a study about the lack of diversity issues being discussed in grad school, that specifically was focusing on LGBT issues, I contacted every social work school in the country and asked them if their content includes LGBT, and had the resources then to pose to CSWE to say, this is an issue that needs to be addressed and needs to be a part of recertification in what you're looking at when you look at schools that say they teach diversity. Are they really focusing on the whole realm of diversity, anti-Semitism, LGBTQ, all these things? So that then caused CSWE to really administer some guidelines that every school had to follow in order to get recertified. So I wonder, has anybody thought about contacting them about certifications and lack of certifications for schools that don't handle this in a more productive fashion? Because this is really shameful. It's an outrage. And, I think it's really important that we go to the source that can maybe have some input on classes being taught differently, bullying being dealt with differently, make sure the school is handling its student body and educating students to be social workers with the ethical standards to deal with anti-Semitism in an appropriate fashion. Does that make sense?
It does definitely make sense. I think so. The body you're talking about really is the Council on Social Work Education, which sets all the accreditation standards and so forth. And that's a tricky one. They do have a subcommittee on, what is it? They have a subcommittee on oppression, and Dana, help me. What are the
I don't know the name of this. I mean, someone brought it up earlier in the chat, but there's so many chats. I actually was just looking for it and I couldn't. Oh, okay. But I think that is a task, right? I mean, that's something that we should look at. So I think either Amelia or Sam put it up that we can form an interest group through NASW. And I think this should be one of our goals, because I think, Jane, your point is really important, that if we start with.
Well, and maybe write some of these testimonials for CSWE to see and observe what we're seeing, which is, Carol, you've been saying is horrible. It's shameful. It's enlightening, but it's horrible.
It's horrible that people have to find a safe place.
Exactly. And that personally, like you said, it's so hypocritical as a social worker. Social justice is the core of social work. It's like, whoa, where are we? So really I think that I would say put together a really good template, really explaining why this is such a critical issue when you have all these testimonials, or send them the link to this recording. I don't know if the people are being recorded as well, but I think it's really important to demonstrate that there's an issue here.
I think you hit it right on the head. What do they say? Nail on the head. That this is the first group that I know of that where we've gotten so many people together to talk about, who are in the profession, related to the profession, to talk about anti-Semitism. And that's powerful, right? And you've even spoken about incidences at specific schools, which are totally shocking. Okay, what you've experienced as students is just unbelievable. So I think out of all of this, that Dana and I and probably Amelia and maybe Samantha, put together some kind of a statement that we can begin to work with, because we're going to hopefully meet more as an interest group. I think our idea was to maybe come together once a month and have an interest group and work at this as something that we could take to the Council on Social Work Education. Because my feeling is that once we can talk about oppression in the global, right? But anti-Semitism has to be a specific, because it's caught up in white privilege. Well, the Jews have all the money. The Jews is what are they complaining about? Blah, 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 blah. And what we're saying now is no, that's not enough. Anti-Semitism is impacting little kids. It's impacting parents. It's impacting grandparents, the whole gambit. And that social work has to have a stand in dealing with it. I mean, I was just afraid when it gets caught up in all of the other oppressions, it doesn't go anywhere. It has to be specific in terms of anti-Semitism. And, you know, that's.
I'd like to make an offer
Yes.
because my brother is very involved in computer marketing and this kind of thing. So he helped me in Toronto. We put together sort of like a program. We put together a letter for our College of Social Work. We circulated it amongst ourselves. And we collected 130 college members' signatures to our letter, which could be done with his software. And he did it as a favor. And I'm sure he would be open to doing it for this group. So if your communication would be more powerful once it was tweaked, and then people could circulate it to all the college members or the NASW members that they knew, you know, we could get thousands, you know, we could get 1,000 people, and it would sort of help. Because what they ended up doing is they even reprinted the letter we sent, and they were so contrite, and they said, we are willing to learn and unlearn. So it was a very powerful message from the College of Social Work. And so I have that technology that I can share if, you know, if there's enough interest that everybody would use the grapevine and put it out to other social workers and get lots of social workers to sign this letter you come up with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Thanks.
I guess we're sort of like running out of time. Did we get to everything?
Right. Well, I think Evan and Beverly still have their hands up. If we want to just quickly respond.
And
Yeah.
I also just want to cut in and let you know that we are happy to stay later,
Okay.
as we can tell that this is a space that's needed. And so I'm not native, but Sam, our executive director, is native, and she says that time is a suggestion. So as
Okay.
long as this space is needed, we're here to support it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I think Evan, do you want to speak first?
Sure. I just want to just quickly put out on Orthodox. My sense is most of the folks here aren't, but I just wanted to offer, because it is, you know, Rosh Hashanah coming up pretty soon. So just to offer that, you know, another sort of intervention and thing we can do is kind of on a spiritual level as well. I just want to keep that in mind. You know, this week's Parsha tells us about Tochacha, about what's going to happen when we move away from Kadosh Baruch Hu, and you know, we're really seeing it in our times. So you know, whatever that means to folks, whatever their connection is or isn't, but you know, in sort of fighting this battle, there's a spiritual component as well. And so if going home and saying some Tehillim, or you know, whatever you know works for you, in that spiritual strategy, I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very much.
Beverly.
First, thank you very much for this program. I'm a social worker, but I'm also an occupational therapist. I'm a Fordham alum, and I'm a longtime university educator. What I find very upsetting, aside from what I hear about people's experiences, and mine have been, I've experienced what I will call modest anti-Semitism, something that I probably expected in my life. But what I find reprehensible is the fact that our universities, all of them, have websites that say that they need to protect students in the sense of having free discourse, and everyone has the right to an education that without fear. Now, they may say it in different words. My last university, I just retired from, the City University of New York. Previously, I was at Stony Brook. Everybody has that. And to let the departments, separate from the profession, off the hook and not hold their feet to the fire. Middle stage would find this absolutely abhorrent. Any academic review committee of any program, you would get slapped so hard if this shows up, when the committee comes and interviews students and they say that we're afraid to talk because our professors marginalize us, you're going to lose your accreditation or at least be written up. And some of you are smiling. So I'm saying this to students. I know people feel uncomfortable. If you can't go to your chair, go right upstairs to the provost. Move that letter right up with as many signatures as possible if you have to do it with anonymity, because this is very ugly and it metastasizes. And I don't want to say any more about it because I'm rather passionate on it.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point.
I like that analogy. It metastasizes.
Yes,
That's
it's a good word for this.
very good.
So, I mean, I feel like the overall feedback we're getting also is that, I mean, people want to talk more. I mean, the idea of a letter, of an interest group. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of motivation here for us to continue this in some way and to really make a difference.
Yeah, we've got the momentum going now. We've got all of the people who we feel are so involved and so concerned and so intensely involved, I guess, excited about this, concerned about this. We can't let it just drop. I mean, we cannot say, okay, nice to hear from you. Thank you. All right. So we continue, I guess, with an interest group. Sam, is that what we should do?
Yeah, well, and Amelia just sent me a note that she can share the next steps, right?
Yes, absolutely. So for our next steps with an interest group, what I can do is I can meet with Carol and Dina and pick some preliminary dates. The first group that we'll do is just we call it almost an interest meeting for folks to join. It'll be only Jewish social workers as an affinity group to see what the interest group will be. So what the purpose of it will be. We have many interest groups. Some of them have formed a book club. Some of them formed a peer support. Some of them work on developing CEs or writing statements. So it's kind of getting this group back together and seeing what actions you would like performed through a special interest group. And once that's collected, we'll define what that special intergroup purpose will be, and then find a common date or common weekday that folks can join together. They're usually once a month. Some of them join together every 6 weeks, but again, that's going to be completely defined by this community.
And it won't be on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur.
Right.
We can figure that out.
Right. All right. And Amelia, we have the list, or you have the list of everyone who registered tonight, right?
Yes.
That's great. Okay, good.
So we can, once that that date for the interest group meeting is set, we can send it out to everyone who's here today. We'll also send it out to all of the other channels that we use to promote this chat. And again, it'll be free. There's going to be no membership required. You do not have to be an NASW member. One of the reasons that we do that is because we want our membership to be and our activities to be more reflective of social workers at large. And we recognize that there are many reasons that people haven't become an NASW member in the first place, such as their experiences of anti-Semitism from and within NASW itself. So, we need our community members from groups like this to help us become a chapter and an association that is more reflective of social work and the social work community. So thank you for anyone who's would be participating in that.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for coming on tonight. I know it's not always easy to hear all this and to address something that we don't want to really talk about. So thank you, everyone. And I also want to.
Yeah, I just want to say, and it's certainly not easy to share. And we really appreciate all of you who shared it. It's just so meaningful and so important to actually hear what is happening, because that just makes it real.
Right. And I think I also want to thank Carol Cox, my co-presenter, for writing the article that she did and really inspiring so many people and bringing this to the forefront of us to discuss. So thank you, Carol.
Oh, and I want to say thank you to Allison, who was one of the first people
That's right.
who emailed me after she read the article and said, wow, what can we do? I thank you, Allison. We may be calling on you more. She's right on Long Island. I know that.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
All right, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for this great discussion.